Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of Islam for Europeans. I'm your host, Robert. Please like and subscribe to the channel. So, I wanted to make this episode on um, why many white converts are quote unquote yes men. Now, as a caveat, when I say yes men, I'm not saying that to be misogynistic. This applies equally, to sisters and brothers, but it's an old term that was used in I guess, like as a business term for people who basically agree with whatever their management says. When their management asks them for their own opinion on things, they just say yes, we agree. And this can have devastating effects on a company and the future of their organization because people, if they're a yes man, they don't want to speak out and you don't want to say, hey, maybe if you do things differently, this will have greater effects on our organization, or it may avoid a disaster. So as a perfect example of this, think of the company Chevrolet. In the 1980s, they produced the Chevy Nova, which sold really well in North America. But when they tried to sell the Nova in Latin America, it didn't sell very well at all because in Spanish, Nova means it doesn't go in Spanish. Now, think about how many people, in Chevrolet who may have known this but didn't speak up about it. Hey, maybe it's not a good idea to market a car that basically says it doesn't go in Latin America, right? But this is basically part of a psychological concept that we call groupthink. So groupthink is a tendency for the group in any type of organization to have uniformity in what they're saying and not produce any kind of alternative opinions. And whenever someone presents these kind of alternative opinions, they get shot down. And this can have devastating effects on an organization. Now, you would think that converts to Islam, especially European descendant converts to Islam, would have a better inside perspective on how what the Muslim community says and does has an effect on our non-Muslim populations. Because at the end of the day, there are families, there are friends, there are communities, and you would think that they would have some sort of kind of insider information on the subject. Now, it's understandable why many converts, don't really provide their input when it comes to this for several reasons. And, like I said, I'm not blaming the Muslim community in general. I'm not blaming the converts in general. It's more of, an overall, I guess kind of mindset, that doesn't, it's a culture that is very difficult to change. Because converts, first and foremost, they're not trying to ruffle any feathers. Many of them are coming in and, they're dealing with a lot of loneliness issues. They're dealing with a lot of issues with their families. And, they're trying to make friends in the Muslim community. So, they're going to go along with mostly whatever they say. They're not going to present any ideas to the contrary, because, they're at this point, especially when they just converted, they're more into like group harmony as opposed to like trying to change things or present like a different opinion, right? So and and on top of that, many of them, many converts who end up becoming integrated members of the Muslim community, they're either in basically three types of different situations, vis-a-vis their families. Situation number one is that their family is very accepting, and if they're very accepting, they tend to be very liberal. And what I mean by liberal is, basically do what you want. It's many kind of, or they may hold kind of like left wing opinions. So, in this situation, they tend not to be, very nationalistic. They tend not to be very right wing. I'm talking about their families here. So they kind of have all these kind of like, like a kind of a left wing, anti-Western opinions to begin with, right? The second situation is when you have, a convert who's, basically been shut out by their families. Their family may be very Islamophobic. Their family may be very right wing, very anti-immigrant, and they may get kicked out of the house, or they may be walking a tightrope. They may not have told their family. So many of these converts are coming in with these kind of really traumatic experiences, and for them to, it's like when you tell them things like, hey, maybe you shouldn't use certain terms because it would make it appear as though Muslims are like some sort of fifth column. They don't really care at this point because they've rightfully so incurred many difficult things with their families. So they it's very difficult for them to see that there are many non-Muslims that have no problem with Muslims. There are many non-Muslims who have a neutral or positive opinion of Islam. They tend to think differently. They tend to think that people in the West are mainly against us, and rightly so because they've had suffered these traumatic experiences with their families. And the third situation is people are just living independently. It doesn't matter what their family's reaction is. They got their own house. Maybe they're older. They're living on their own. So to them, like changing the status quo to mosque doesn't really matter that much, right? So, and on top of that, you have a Muslim community that, rightfully so, tends to reject any kind of like outside the box strategy or like ways of doing. And I think this is because they've had bad experiences with very left wing Muslims trying to change things in a manner that's violating the our aspects of our faith. Whether that's uh, having music at a mosque, or total free mixing between genders at a mosque, or allying with groups that are completely opposed to our religious tradition. So mosque leadership tends to, rightfully so, have a knee-jerk reaction when someone comes in and says, hey, maybe it's a better idea if we don't do this or do this. And even if the person presenting those opinions follows Islam very strictly and isn't saying anything that's opposed to the Quran and Sunnah, I guess the knee-jerk reaction is to kind of reject these kind of new ideas, right? So and I'm saying this with love. I used myself. I was a convert that just kind of assimilated into a Muslim community. I didn't really say things, because, I was more interested in group harmony and making friendships than, saying, hey, maybe this work or maybe this won't work. So I understand where a lot of these new converts are coming from, so, and, on top of that, what happens normally is if you get a convert that's just completely fed up with, mosque leadership or, Muslim community in general, they tend to go off the boil. They tend to be very extreme and sometimes angry at mosque leadership because of what they're doing, and it doesn't really come off very well, right? So, and again, there are many born Muslims who agree with what we're saying on Islam for Europeans. It's not just converts against the world. There are many born Muslims who agree with the things that we're saying here. It's just that even they tend not to want to, kind of want to challenge these opinions or the status quo because trying to change the way mosque leadership thinks about certain things is such, they know it's such a difficult nut to crack that they tend to just leave. They leave they leave the mosque. They just practice Islam on their own. Maybe they'll come for Friday prayer, but at the end of the day, they're just like, there's not much that we can do to change these people's opinions. And yes men converts, and like yes, and by extension yes women converts, um you know because they follow the status quo when it comes to the way Muslims do things, the way Muslims think about things. um you know Mosque leadership, they look at those and go, this gives them more, basically carte blanche to just act in the same manner. Like if you have a convert who says very, very, very uh, anti-Western things to an extreme, like our governments are doing absolutely terrible things, to the Muslim world, and that criticism is totally warranted. But a lot of these converts in trying to fit in will extrapolate that anger to basically anyone in the West, and anyone and everything, because they're trying to fit in so much. So, mosque leadership, whether that's, imams or duat, like Islamic preachers, YouTube personalities, they're going to act the same way. And when people criticize them, they go, well, what? Johnny who converted, he says the exact same things. So he's the expert, on his people. So, we should be acting in the exact same manner because it's justified, because we see the converts themselves doing the exact same things. Right. So, like I said, I am not a yes man. And I say that with love because I care about the image of Islam in the West, which has an overall effect on the Muslim Ummah as a whole. you know, and I would be doing a disservice, to the Muslim community if I was just parroting whatever they said, on every topic, because I want things to change. I mean, this isn't 2001 where anti-Islam sentiment was at its absolute zenith, where you had people putting Osama bin Laden urinal cakes in the bathroom, where you had mosques being monitored day and night, where you had Muslims being detained you know, for no reason whatsoever. I mean, that still happens, but it doesn't nearly compare to as much as 2001. And public opinion in general, Islam stock has gone way up. Whether that's um, the Israeli-Palestinian issue, or Muslims' leadership in running the protests against certain school agendas, or the fact that Muslims are very hardworking and diligent, and have good moral values, which Westerners can see they're lacking so much, and if they were to adapt the same things, it would be it would have enormous benefits for the Muslim community. So, in conclusion, we at Islam for Europeans, the things that we're presenting, we hope are in line with the Quran and the Sunnah. We don't want to disobey Allah and His Messenger. We are taking the approach that, Islam can save, the quote unquote save the West, that it can provide many solutions to, Westerners. And that in and of itself is not destructive to the rest of the Muslim community. It's not a non-zero sum game. We think that this will give more of a bargaining chip actually to Muslims currently living in the West, which hopefully will pay dividends for the whole Muslim community in the future. So, and many people agree with this. So I think that's how we're trying to change the game. So the people who aren't yes men, will be able to, inshallah, change the culture of Islamic organizations in the West. Right, so that's my time for the day at Islam for Europeans. I'm your host, Robert. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.